was walking through the bushes when I heard a voice. It sounded muffled, almost like somebody crying out for help. Who is that? I started to feel a little nervous. I took this shortcut a lot, but never had felt this afraid before. A part of me wants to rush out of these bushes, and another part wanted to know what is going on. Maybe somebody really needs help. The sound continues. I slowly creep towards the voice and look through the bushes and saw a girl tied to a tree. She was half naked. Oh my God. I looked around and saw a man that was boiling some water in a big pot. I started to tremble. I wanted to save her, but I was afraid. What if I get hurt, or even worse, lose my life in trying to help? I took a deep breath and slowly crept closer. I peek around to see if there was anybody else around. I notice a camera. It was well placed on a tripod pointing at the girl in distress. It's as if this sick bastard was videoing the way he was tormenting this girl. I must help her, I decide. Looks like he was alone, but I saw some bags packed around the tree, so he has to have company to be having all these bags. I decided that maybe the others are off and will be back soon, so I have to act fast. As I was thinking, I saw a bee, and I slapped at it, and it bit my eyes. God, I almost cried out, but I kept my composure and endured the pain. I pounced at the man and punched him to the ground. He tried getting up, and then I kicked him. In a movie, one punch would keep a guy down, but this is real life. This is really happening. The guy was laying on the ground, looked about mid-50s. I watched him, wondering if I should strike again before his friends get back. As I was about to strike him again, I heard the girl screamed and said, "No! Please stop." I was confused. Why would she want me to stop? Isn't she in danger? "I'm doing a video for my channel," she said. "I am not in danger." As I was about to respond, I only felt when I got one hit in the back of my neck, and I fell to the ground. I grabbed the back of my neck as I felt the sharp pain from the strike. I slowly got back up to see who hit me. I saw this tall, dark guy with dreads, with a piece of stick in his hand, looking at me with fire in his eyes. "Is what de bumbo clot going on here? Who de Ross is this?" he shouted angrily. "Batty boy, talk fast before I knock out your blood clot." I held out my hand in anticipation that he might strike again. I responded nervously. I was just walking by and heard this young lady crying for help, and I saw her tied to the tree and thought she was in danger. "Please, I didn't know you guys were filming." The old guy that I striked got up and said, "You're goose cooking new boy." He was Jamaican too. I started to panic. I am dead for sure. I tried looking around to see if I can run. As I was about to run for it, I saw another guy emerging from the direction that I was about to run towards. "We have company." "A hootie blood clot this." He had a gun in his hand. At this point, I knew this was it for me. I decided that I'm not going to beg for my life. It is what it is, so I might as well go out with my dignity. The girl jumped in front of me and said, "Don't bother with the stupidness. He was obviously just being a gentleman. Look at it this way. What if I was really in danger? Or better yet, your sister or your mother? Wouldn't you want somebody to try to rescue her? We already don't have a lot of good Samaritan. Don't contribute to its obsolescence." The Rasta man sighed and said, "You're lucky in a boy. Get the fuck out of here." I felt relief, but now that my brain started functioning again, I couldn't stop thinking about that girl. She was really beautiful. I started to walk away when she said, "Hey, what's your name?" I nervously replied, "Michael." "You're not from the island. Where are you from?" "I am from the United States. Florida, to be exact." "I am Tracy. You're a good man, Mike," she said. "Thank you." The men gave me that stare, as if they're telling me to leave with their eyes. Her smile still dangles in my head. It's like her beauty became an anesthesia to my pain. I could no longer feel anything but that pounding in my chest. Her eyes were as bright as the daisies in a garden. Her hair was frowed in one, and she was about 5 feet in height, the most beautiful body I've ever seen. My heart contends with danger, as a part of me wanted to turn back and let her know how she makes me feel. The wind rustled through the leaves as I walked back to my hotel, my mind still clouded with thoughts of Tracy. Her beauty was hypnotizing, a masterpiece sculpted by the gods. Her skin was as smooth as satin, a rich, dark chocolate hue that glowed under the Caribbean sun. Her full lips were a tempting shade of rose, plump and inviting, and her high cheekbones added to the regal elegance of her face. Her body was a perfect hourglass, with curves that could bring a man to his knees. Her eyes, deep and soulful, held a fire within them that made me want to know every thought behind them. Back at Sandals, I stood on my balcony, gazing at the ocean. Yet all I could see was her. I had to see her again before I left. This island had always been my escape, my sanctuary, but now it held something far more precious. A few nights later, I found myself at a party with some friends. Music thumped in the background, and laughter filled the air. And then I saw her. Tracy. My heart skipped a beat. She was at the bar, surrounded by friends, laughing, her energy lighting up the room. I approached her, eager to reconnect. "Tracy," I said, smiling, expecting that same warmth from before. She turned, her eyes cold, her expression one of confusion and annoyance. "Do I know you?" she asked, her tone sharp. I blinked. "It's me, Michael, from the other day, in the woods." She frowned as her friend whispered something in her ear. "I don't know you," she said, her voice cutting through me like a blade. "Please leave." The room spun. My stomach dropped. Laughter and chatter around me felt distant. I felt humiliated, like a fool. I turned away, barely hearing my friends offering me a drink out of pity. I refused and left the party, vowing never to return to this island again. As I reached my car, a voice called out, "Mike?" I turned, and my breath caught in my throat. It was Tracy, or so I thought, but she had changed into a white dress, different from before. She stepped closer, concern in her eyes. "Are you okay?" I scoffed, my embarrassment fueling my anger. "Oh, so now you remember me, now that your friends aren't around?" "What are you talking about? I just got here." Confusion swirled in my mind. "You were just at the bar, pretending not to know me." She frowned. "Michael, that wasn't me. That was my twin sister, Stacy." The world shifted beneath my feet. A twin. It all made sense now. The coldness, the rejection, the humiliation. My heart pounded as Tracy reached for my hand. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Let me explain." I exhaled, my anger melting away as relief took its place. "I need a drink." We talked for hours, laughter replacing the earlier sting of humiliation. One drink turned into dinner into long walks on the beach, and soon I was spending more and more time in Jamaica just to be with her. Our love was intoxicating, and our nights were filled with passionate lovemaking.
Oh, yeah!
Our bodies tangled in a dance of unbridled desire. She was my addiction, and I was hers. Then came the storm. My half-brother James, a man of wealth and influence, arrived in Jamaica. He met Stacy, and in no time they were engaged. Tracy and I were thrilled at first, happy for them, until her family turned against us. "You and Tracy can't be together," her mother said coldly one night at dinner. "Stacy is marrying James. That makes you family now." "That's ridiculous," Tracy protested. "Michael and I met first. We love each other." "Love won't feed this family, Tracy," her mother snapped. "James can provide. We cannot risk this." I clenched my fists. "So this is about money?" Her mother's silence was answer enough. Tears streamed down Tracy's face as she grabbed my hand. "We'll leave. We don't need them." And so we did. We ran away, escaping into the night, seeking a future where love mattered more than wealth. But fate was cruel. James turned out to be a monster, and Stacy suffered for it. He abused her, manipulated her, controlled her. The family, once blinded by greed, now saw the truth, but it was too late. Stacy was trapped in a marriage built on lies and pain. Her mother, once so firm, now came to me in tears. "Michael, I was wrong. You truly love Tracy. Please help us. Help Stacy." I looked at Tracy, my love, my everything, and I knew this was the moment that would define us all. With vengeance burning in my veins and love guiding my heart, I took Tracy's hand. Let's end this. The final battle had begun. One night, I went to see James at the Airbnb, where I knew he and Stacy were staying. As I was about to knock on the door, I heard Stacy scream, "Leave me alone! I'm going home! We don't want your bumbleclot money! You owe one pussyclot psycho and my tired abuse!" she shouted in her Jamaican dialect. Then came a loud thud, followed by her desperate cry. I burst through the door. James stood there, clenching his fist, his face twisted in fury. Stacy was lying on the ground, crying bitterly and curled up in the fetal position, in pain from James's punches. "What the fuck are you doing here?" he snarled as he saw me burst through the door. "Let her go, James. This isn't right," I replied. His eyes darkened. "Little brother came to save the day. Are you here to be a hero, little brother?" he asked with a sarcastic tone. "You took my father away, and now you want to take my wife." "What?" I was stunned. James sneered. "All my life I lived with the fact that our father abandoned me and my mother for your bitch of a mother. He replaced me with you." He walked towards me, still clenching his fist. "Our father abandoned us too, but I don't let bitterness consume me, brother," I replied. "We are brothers, and I only come here to tell you what you're doing to this young lady is not right." James then turned his back and replied, "So that bitch felt the pain my mother felt." His insults cut deep, igniting a fire within me that clouded my judgment. The moment he dragged my mother into it, something broke. In an instant, we were lunging at each other, fists flying in a chaotic storm of anger and emotion. His punches landed hard, searing pain blooming across my ribs, but I couldn't back down. With a surge of adrenaline, I fought back, grappling with him until I finally overpowered him. I locked eyes with Stacy, who was still reeling from the escalation, and without a second thought, I grabbed her hand. "Let's go," I shouted, dragging her with me as we bolted out of the chaos, heart pounding in my chest. "Wait!" James yelled, but we didn't stop. The sound of his frustration chased us into the night, but I couldn't afford to look back. The stakes had never been higher, and I knew we had to escape before it was too late. We arrived at the Airbnb where Tracy and I were staying, but Tracy was not home. I sat there, bruised and battered. Stacy tended to my wounds. She placed a gentle hand on my back. "Don't be so hard on yourself." I exhaled heavily, staring at the floor. Then I turned to face her. Her eyes, warm, understanding, held me in place. In my drunken haze, I swore they were Tracy's, the same deep, soulful gaze I had come to love. The wine clouded my mind, blurring reality. She held me tighter, a warmth radiating from her body that poured over me like a molten flame. When our lips finally collided, they were softer and more hesitant than I expected, sending shivers down my spine. The alcohol coursing through my veins dulled my inhibitions. I felt vulnerable yet electrified. Every tangled emotion, my pain, my anger, my longing for connection, swirled between us, igniting a thrilling tension. As our bodies pressed together, desire spiraled out of control, and in that intoxicating haze, we surrendered to the moment, our souls intertwining as we made love, lost in our own world. Just as our passion reached its climax, there was a loud knock at the door. "My sister," Stacy said softly, and panic washed over me. I froze, the warmth of the moment turning cold as fear took hold. I thought I was making love to Tracy, and now her voice was ringing through the door. The alcohol in my system had blurred my mind, but in that instant, everything became clear. I was in a messy situation, and the last thing I wanted was for Tracy to walk in on us. I quickly called out, "Coming, babe," and suddenly felt the rush of panic. I urged Stacy to hide and hurried to get dressed. Just as I finished, I rushed to the door, praying I would make it in time. I could see Tracy pulling her keys from her purse, just moments away from walking in. My heart raced as I steadied myself, trying to act normal. "Babes, you're all bruised up. What happened?" Tracy asked, concern in her eyes. I took a deep breath and explained. "My brother and I got into a fight because I was helping Stacy. I caught my brother beating her up." She looked around and asked, "Where is she?" I quickly lied, saying, "She went to see her mom." I felt a knot in my stomach. I had never lied to Tracy before because I love her so much, and now I was hiding the truth. I just hoped she wouldn't ask more questions. I had to find a way to distract Tracy so that Stacy could leave. I told Tracy I wanted us to go out. She responded and said, "I'm too bruised up to go out and that I should remain inside." "Do you know that my brother hates me?" I asked her. She responded, "Why do you say that?" "Tracy, my relationship with James is complicated. Our father abandoned him when he was just 9, then met my mother and had me. For a while I thought I had the perfect family." I paused, the pain rising. "When I was 7, everything shattered. I overheard my mother arguing with him about another woman. He hit her, and I remember crying, begging him to stop. He just looked at me with cold indifference before he walked away. That was the last I ever saw of him." I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. "My dad used to tell me about James. I remember the day we met in the park. He was so excited to see me, and I felt so happy. He even told me where he lived. But when I went to visit him, his mother chased me away like I was something vile. She treated me with such hatred. After that, James never spoke to me again. At first, I thought he was just scared of his mother. But now that we're adults, it feels clear. My brother really hates me." The weight of that realization pressed heavily on my heart. I wanted love and connection, but instead, I'm left with this heartache. Tracy's eyes widened in shock. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry you had to experience that." Just then, her phone rang, interrupting the moment. She pointed at me, signaling she needed a minute, and retreated into the kitchen to take the call. My instincts flared. Something about her sudden need for privacy felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. As I waited, I strained to listen. I heard her voice rising and falling in hushed tones, but one phrase cut through the noise. "Don't come here." My heart raced. Who was she talking to? What was going on? I wished I could hear more, but instead, I tried to focus on getting Stacy out of the house. My unease growing with every second Tracy remained out of sight. I watched Stacy storm out of the shadows and into the kitchen, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. What was she doing? My mind raced with possibilities, fear coiling in my stomach. I held my breath, bracing myself for whatever was about to unfold. The last thing I wanted was for her to confront Tracy about what happened between us. Stacy's face was a storm of emotions, fear, despair, and a hint of desperation. She blinked back tears, and my pulse quickened as those glistening droplets began to tumble down her cheeks. Tracy turned, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Stacy?" Then came the moment that felt like an eternity. "Sis, I'm sorry to barge into your house like this, but I just had to see you." Her words hung in the air like a loaded gun, and I could almost hear the trigger being pulled. Would she spill the secret that could shatter everything? My breath caught, and I could feel the very walls closing in around me. Tension crackled in the air as I braced for the worst, each heartbeat like a countdown to disaster. Would her admission of vulnerability turn into a bombshell of betrayal? Tracy's expectant gaze lingered on Stacy, her expression shifting from confusion to concern, and I could see the shadows of doubt creeping into her eyes. Every instinct screamed at me to leap into action, to stop this before it spiraled out of control. I was trapped in a whirlwind of anxiety and anticipation, desperately hoping that what I feared would remain just a secret between us. But deep down, I knew fate had a knack for unraveling ties more tightly wound. Stacy then said, "I'm sorry for letting James and Mike end up fighting. I'm so sorry, sis." I felt relieved. So Stacy was just using her head to throw off Tracy from knowing that she was in the room all along. Wow, that was a close one. The weight of guilt settled in my gut as I thought of my brother. Had I gone too far this time? Maybe I deserved his punches more than I cared to admit. Guilt gnawed at me as I stepped outside, desperate for a breath of fresh air, while Tracy and Stacy faced their emotional storm in the kitchen. As I walked into the warm Jamaican night, I spotted a sleek Toyota Mark X parked directly in front of the Airbnb. It was a common sight, but what made my heart race was the figure climbing out of the car. A tall, dark man with dreadlocks. My pulse quickened as I recognized him. It was the same Rasta man who'd hit me in the neck when I thought Tracy was in danger. Anger bubbled within me, frustration and rage boiling over. I clenched my fists, ready for a fight. "What the hell are you doing here?" I shouted, bracing for whatever he had to say. "Relax, man. You're just the person I want to see, man." His calmness only fueled my anger. I forced myself to breathe. "What do you want?" I asked, irritation creeping into my voice. "Relax, man. You're just the person I want to see, man." His calmness only fueled my anger. I forced myself to breathe. "What do you want?" I asked, irritation creeping into my voice. "Listen good now," he said, his Jamaican accent thickening with every word. "I know you and Tracy are together now, but I want you to know she is always going to be my woman, man. I'm tired of this back and forth. Every day she's telling me she's going to tell you the truth, but I'm fed up." Confusion mixed with my anger. "What truth?" I shot back, instinctively knowing this couldn't be good. "The truth is, she and I are still together. The only reason she dated you is 'cause I cheated on her. She wants us to get back together and keeps saying she'll tell you soon." Each of his words landed like blows, shaking my sense of reality. The shock hit me hard, leaving me momentarily speechless. Was this really true? My thoughts raced as I struggled to understand the weight of his accusations. "You think this is funny?" I shot back, disbelief mixing with outrage. The tension in the air thickened, with everything on the line: my heart, my relationships, and my peace of mind. The darkness of the night surrounded us, amplifying the looming confrontation, each moment feeling like a standoff in a twisted drama that was unfolding before my eyes. I gulped in disbelief. At this moment I felt like a Jamaican and said, "Rasta boy, leave me bumbo clot yard." He then laughed at me and went back inside his car and drove off. What is this? Is this all true? What the fuck is going on? This must be a dream. The air outside was cool, the night strangely silent after the chaos that had unfolded. I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play here, something far more complicated than I could fully grasp. As I walked back inside, the Rasta man's words echoed in my mind. "She wants him, not me. She's just been using me to make him jealous." The words felt like a betrayal, a sting of truth too harsh to ignore. Tracy and Stacy were still in the kitchen when I walked back in. The moment I crossed the threshold, I caught the look of pure shock on Tracy's face. She was staring at her phone, her expression a mix of disbelief and horror. It hit me. They had been watching the surveillance camera as I spoke with her Rasta man outside. I could see the realization dawning on her. She knew I had just had a conversation with him. Tracy was listening to the very words that had shattered whatever illusion I thought we had built together. "You heard everything, didn't you?" I said, my voice steady but laced with anger. She nodded slowly, her eyes welling up with tears. I didn't know you would find out like this," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The heat of betrayal surged through me as I confronted her. All this time, I'd believed I was building something meaningful with Tracy, but in reality, I was just another pawn in her twisted game. I took a breath, trying to steady myself against the storm of emotions swirling within me. The truth hung heavily in the air, and I couldn't ignore the implications of what I had just learned. Stacy shifted uncomfortably. Tracy didn't say anything immediately. She just stared at me, eyes full of regret. It was as if she was trying to come up with the right words, but there was no way to undo the mess she'd created. "I didn't mean for things to go this far," Tracy said quietly. "I never wanted to hurt you." I clenched my jaw, anger rising. "But you did, Tracy. You used me. You've been using me to make him jealous." Stacy bit her lip, looking away from both of us. "I didn't know it was going to turn out like this," she whispered. "I didn't want to hurt anyone." The weight of everything finally hit me, and I felt a rush of nausea. "So what now?" I spat, barely able to breathe. "What's next? Are you going to tell me it was all a game? That I'm just some pawn to you?" Tracy's voice trembled as she tried to explain herself, her eyes filled with tears. "At first, I just wanted to make Scatta jealous," she confessed, her tone desperate. "He cheated on me, and I thought if I started seeing someone else, it would hurt him. But then, I really fell in love with you. I didn't want to lose you, but I still have feelings for him." I could hardly process her words, the mixture of emotions swirling inside me. "You still love him?" I asked, feeling the foundation beneath me start to crumble. "Yes," she admitted, her voice breaking. "But it's complicated. Scatta wanted me to marry you so I could get my U.S. citizenship. After I became a citizen, I would divorce you and marry him so that we could both live in the U.S. and have a better life. I don't know if I can trust you," I finally said, my voice choked with emotion. "You've made it impossible for me to believe in anything we had." The truth of her confession pushed deeper, unraveling everything I thought we were building together. I turned away from her, stepping back outside into the quiet night. I needed space to think. I left and went back to the hotel in Sandals. I planned to spend 6 months in Jamaica and marry Tracy. How could this have all happened in one day? My brother? What a coincidence he came to Jamaica, met her sister, and now all this. The universe must really hate me. Maybe I am cursed. Weeks after the confrontation with Tracy were a blur. I kept my distance from both her and Stacy, not because I didn't want to talk, but because everything felt too complicated. Tracy tried calling me several times, but I ignored the calls. I couldn't face her. As for Stacy, she reached out to me a few times, sending messages that were mostly apologies. I was still angry, still processing what had happened. But eventually, I agreed to meet her. It had been a few weeks since I'd spoken to her, and I knew I couldn't keep running from everything. We decided to meet at Margaritaville in Ocho Rios. We went over by the bar, and I got a Smirnoff Ice. I didn't even offer her a drink because I didn't feel the need to be a gentleman at this point. "I'm sorry," she said quietly as I sat down across from her. "I never wanted any of this to happen. I didn't know what to do, but I should have told you the truth sooner." I could feel the tension between us. "So, what now, Stacy?" I asked, my voice steady. "What's the truth?" She exhaled, looking down at her coffee cup. "I'm still not sure what I want," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I know I shouldn't have let James pull me into this mess. And I know I shouldn't have let things go as far as they did with you." She hesitated before continuing. "But I don't regret it either." My heart pounded in my chest. I knew what she was saying, but I wasn't sure if I could believe it. "So what does that mean for us?" I asked. Stacy reached across the table, her hand brushing mine lightly. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I needed to be honest. With you, and with myself." We both sat there in silence for a while, each of us lost in our thoughts. It wasn't easy, but somehow we found a way to move forward. 2 months later, the following weeks were filled with their own set of challenges. Tracy tried to get in touch with me again, and each time I was met with the same mix of anger and hurt. I couldn't bring myself to face her, not just yet. The betrayal still stung. But as time passed, Stacy and I began to build something, slowly, carefully. The physical connection we shared that night didn't make everything go away, but it did start something new between us. We spent time together, talking, getting to know each other without the weight of James's jealousy hanging over us. One afternoon, about 2 months after that initial night, Stacy invited me over to her apartment. She was acting a little different than usual, quieter, more serious. When I walked in, she was sitting on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't look up at first. "Stacy," I asked, my voice gentle. "What's going on?" She hesitated, then finally met my eyes. "I have something I need to tell you," she said softly. I've been feeling sick, a lot. And I didn't know what it meant at first, but I went to the doctor." My heart skipped a beat. I knew what was coming, but I didn't know how to prepare for it. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The words hit me like a freight train. I couldn't breathe for a moment. "Pregnant?" I repeated, trying to make sense of it. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, but I was afraid. After everything that happened, I didn't know what you'd think." I stood there for a moment, letting the news sink in. I had mixed emotions, but one thing was certain. We were going to make this work. Despite the mess we were in, this child was something we both wanted. It was a new beginning for us, a new chapter in a story that had been filled with pain and confusion. I woke up next to Stacy. She was so beautiful. It's like the pregnancy made her even more beautiful. I heard a knock on the door, and when I went to the door, it was Tracy. She started telling me how much she misses me and really can't live without me. I asked her about her Rasta man, Skada. He got married to a white woman and is now living in the States. A part of me felt good, but at the same time felt bad for her. I couldn't allow myself to care. As Stacy came by the door to ask who it was, Tracy's mouth dropped. "You're pregnant? Who is the father?" "Is it James?" Zerania Tracy asked. "Michael is the father," Stacy replied. Tracy turned to me. I replied, "How could you? How could I? How could you?" As Tracy was about to leave, a car pulled up by the Airbnb. It was James. James stood there, his face twisted with rage. "You think you can have everything, don't you?" he shouted. "First my father, now Stacy. No one's going to take what's mine." I saw the anger in his eyes, the jealousy and bitterness that had consumed him for years. He didn't care about Stacy. He never had. This was about power, about destroying me. He lunged toward me, and I barely had time to react. We both tumbled outside, the sound of footsteps echoing through the air as Tracy and Stacy followed. But James wasn't going to let me get away. He was enraged, his fists swinging wildly, landing punches that I barely managed to block. The fight was brutal, raw, and unforgiving. Each blow I landed, each one he threw, was laced with years of hatred. "You took everything from me," James spat, blood dripping from his lip. "Now, I'm going to take it all back. I dodged one of his swings and shoved him into the dirt. My heart was pounding in my chest, and for a moment, everything felt like it was happening in slow motion. But I could feel the weight of the situation closing in. James was dangerous, and the longer this went on, the more I realized it wasn't just a fight between brothers. It was a fight for our lives. I kicked him hard, sending him stumbling back toward the woods. His eyes were wild with rage, and I knew he wasn't done. But as he lunged at me one last time, a scream ripped through the air. Stacy had seen enough. She stepped between us, her hands raised. "Stop! Please stop!" she cried, but it was too late. James didn't stop. He lunged again, but this time I wasn't fast enough. With a sickening thud, James fell backward into the trees, the sound of his body hitting the ground echoing through the woods. A few seconds passed before I realized the horrifying truth. James wasn't getting up. Stacy had a knife in her hand, dripping blood. I stood frozen, the reality of what had just happened crashing over us. James was dead, and it was my fault. I looked at Stacy, my heart in my chest. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Stacy stepped forward, her hand gently brushing my arm. "You didn't cause this. It was always going to happen. He never loved me. He was only trying to hurt you." Tears welled in my eyes as I pulled her into my arms. "I love you," I whispered into her hair. "We're going to be okay." Tracy stepped back, her eyes filled with regret, but she said nothing. She had already made her choice. She had used me, played me, and now it was too late for any of that to matter. Her Rasta man wasn't going to save her. The damage was done, and she had lost everything. As I stood there, holding Stacy close, I realized that we were free. Free from the chaos, free from the lies, and free from the bitterness that had poisoned our lives for so long. I had found the one person who truly mattered, the woman who would stand by my side, and together, we would raise our child and build a life that was ours. Tracy, she had already left, her footsteps echoing into the distance as she disappeared from our lives for good. And as the sun began to set over the Jamaican horizon, I knew one thing for sure: we were finally free. Stacy and I had made it through the storm, and we were going to be okay.